All right, today we're going deep on one of the most famous, and let's be honest, one of the most shocking psychological experiments of all time. We're talking about a study that tried to figure out what happens when good people are put in a truly evil place. And what they found, well, it still gives us a lot to think about decades later.
So get this. The basic setup sounds like something straight out of a horror movie. You take 24 totally normal college students, you build a fake prison, and you see what happens. What started as a simple study spiraled into absolute chaos in less than a week.
And this was the big question, right? The psychologist behind it all, Philip Zimbardo, he wasn't trying to study evil people. He wanted to know if the situation itself, the environment, the power dynamic, could actually make good, ordinary people do terrible things. The answer, as they found out, was a terrifying yes. Okay, so let's set the scene. It's 1971, and in the basement of Stanford University's psychology department, researchers have literally built a prison. I mean, they had barred doors, tiny cells, the whole shebang. They wanted this to feel as real as humanly possible. Now, this is super important. Who were the people in this experiment? They were just regular male college students. They'd all volunteered, and here's the kicker. They were all screened to make sure they were psychologically healthy and stable. These weren't guys with anger issues or criminal records. They were just ordinary, well-adjusted kids. Remember that.
So how did they decide who was a guard and who was a prisoner? A coin toss. Totally random. And instantly, their identities changed. The guards got these khaki uniforms, nightsticks, and reflective sunglasses so you couldn't see their eyes. They were given total control. The prisoners, on the other hand, had their identities stripped away. They wore these uncomfortable smocks, no underwear, and were referred to only by a number. The power imbalance was baked in from the very first minute.
And you know what? It took almost no time at all for the line between just playing a role and, well, reality to completely disappear. What started as a game got way too real, way too fast.
The students who were randomly assigned to be guards, they just ran with it. I mean, they started acting in ways that nobody, not even the researchers, saw coming. They became authoritarian, creative in their punishments, and some of them seemed to genuinely enjoy the power they had over the prisoners. They weren't just playing a role anymore. They were the guards.
And what about the prisoners? Well, they fell into their roles just as hard. They became incredibly passive, totally submissive. Some started having emotional breakdowns. They acted like they were actually trapped, forgetting that they were just volunteers in an experiment. The whole thing was becoming a real psychological prison.
The truly stunning part of all this is how quickly everything went downhill. This wasn't some slow, gradual change. It was a complete nosedive. When you look at it day by day, you can really see the collapse unfolding.
Day one was a little weird for everyone, kind of awkward. But by day two, the prisoners tried to rebel. And the guards put that down hard. They used fire extinguishers on them, made them strip naked. It got ugly. And from there, it just got worse. Days 3 through 5 were filled with psychological torture, sleep deprivation, humiliating tasks, solitary confinement. The prisoners were breaking. By day 6, it had to be stopped. Yeah, this whole thing was supposed to go on for 2 weeks, 14 days. It didn't even make it to the halfway point. It had become so cruel, so out of control that they had to pull the plug. And this quote from the study really says it all. The guards weren't just being strict, some of them had become sadistic. They were enjoying the cruelty. And the prisoners weren't just sad, they were having breakdowns, showing signs of real, extreme psychological damage. Just 6 days. Let that sink in. Out of a planned 14, it tells you everything you need to know about how fast and how severe the situation became. So, after all that chaos and ethical fallout, what's the big takeaway? What did we learn from this? Well, the conclusion is probably the most controversial part of the whole study. So, we know it ended because of the escalating cruelty and the prisoners' distress. But here's a crazy detail. Zimbardo himself had gotten so caught up in his role as prison superintendent that it took an outsider, another psychologist who came to visit, to look at the madness and say, "What you are doing to these boys is terrible." That was the wake-up call that finally ended it.
And this brings us to the core idea, situational influence. The theory is that the behavior wasn't because of the individual's personalities. Remember, they were all good people. It was the situation itself, the power given to the guards and taken from the prisoners. It's the idea of the bad barrel, not bad apples. The environment was so toxic, it corrupted the people inside it.
Now, we have to put a big asterisk here. The Stanford Prison Experiment is hugely controversial today. Critics point out all sorts of problems, that Zimbardo might have influenced the guards to be tough, that it wasn't a true scientific experiment. And ethically, it's seen as a massive failure. So while it's a famous study, it's also a deeply flawed one. And that leaves us with one final, kind of haunting question to ask ourselves. It's really easy to sit here and think, oh, I would have been the good guard, or I would have been the one to fight back. But this experiment, for all its flaws, suggests that maybe, just maybe, our own character isn't as solid as we think. In that basement, under those circumstances, who would you have become? The guard or the prisoner?